Everyone. Just wanted to jump in real quick before we get started and say a quick thank you to all my patrons on Patreon. Thank you for supporting this class, and I look forward to creating new videos and new content with your support. So thank you very much. Your name should be appearing in this general area right now. Thanks. Recording. Okay, so I'll go ahead and throw something in here at the beginning about SASA's free virtual conference. The conference itself is on August 15th. But if you would like to submit an abstract, I believe the deadline is May 1st. So that deadline is coming up soon. So if that's something that you're interested in, again, you don't need to have any sort of university affiliation, or you don't need to have an advanced degree in the subject that you're researching. It's an open conference where anybody can submit an abstract. I think the submission requires an abstract and a CV or a resume. But yeah, so if you have any, research that you've done where you've tried to answer a question about the ancient world and you'd like to present it to others, and present it in a context where it's both open to the public, but also there are going to be a lot of experts in these fields there too who can engage with your research and answer questions or ask you interesting questions. That would be a cool thing to do. Okay, so now we're going to work on the exercises from lesson 20 in Lambden. In the previous class, we did not get that far, and part of the reason is that there was a really good question about the movie Stargate, which totally derailed the work on the exercises for a good 15 minutes or so. I don't think that was the only one. I'm not calling out the student who asked that question by any means. It was a great question. I'm glad we got to talk about it. And there were several other things though that also led to a lot of discussions, and not so much working on the Coptic exercises. As I always say, the whole purpose of us being here is just to hang out and work on some Coptic. If we get through any of the exercises at all, it's a success. Actually, if everybody enjoys being here and feels like they're learning cool stuff, it's a success. But we won't go through that many exercises today. We'll only go through, looks like 17 of them, another prime number. We'll just divide it up. We'll just divide it up however we do. Let's just do like 3 at a time. So Rasmus, do you want to take the first 3 of these?
Sure.
Okay.
Let me just get to my own notes there. Right, so the first one is menensa tre pshere en berre bogebol, which then would mean after the young boy left.
Yeah. Where are you getting young boy?
That's the pshere en berre. So yeah. The berre is young.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's literally more like new, but it sounds weird
new.
To say it. A new.
Fresh.
Yeah. Yeah. Like as in like words like freshman, which obviously means like new man, 18-year-old child. Honestly, although don't tell them that. I would have disagreed at 18, but I know better now. Okay, so literally, what's happening here? What's our grammatical construction?
Right. So what we have is this new conjugated infinitive that we've just had introduced, which is the tre brok part. And then this is introduced by the preposition menensa, meaning after. So after that, the young boy came.
Yeah, went out, I guess, or
went out. Yeah, went out. Sorry.
It's worth pointing out that it's worth pointing out that this actually doesn't have absolute tense. It actually doesn't have any tense at all. When you think about the fact that this is actually just a noun, it's like an entire verbal predicate kind of like wrapped up into a package that just behaves as a single noun. And then this is a preposition, men and saw. It literally means men and saw. So saw is a really old word that means, anybody know older stages of Egyptian? What does saw mean? You probably know this word from Middle Egyptian.
Back.
Yeah, it's that word saw that means back.
Oh,
And
Sorry, Mustafa, I missed the last thing you said.
actually, I just said it's mean back and sun.
Yeah. So yeah, so this is a preposition. It's a compound preposition, but it is just a preposition, and then a noun. So this phrase grammatically has no tense in terms of like what a verb phrase would have. And it's the after part of it is really relative to whatever the main clause is. So it could be after he came out, or sorry, went out, after he went out, or it could be after he goes out, or even like a future, like after he will go out, something else will happen. So that's kind of worth noting, just the fact that this is a noun, there's no tense. And we'll get more of that in the next example. Rasmus, do you want to read number 2?
yes. So that's hem preuculip evol en ne mysterion. So as these mysteries were revealed, I think. So we have a similar construction with the preposition hem, and then the entire conjugated infinitival phrase, which is substantivized by the definite article per attached to the beginning of it.
Yeah, exactly correct. I like your use of the passive. I actually didn't even think of that. I just thought of it as after the their unveiling.
After they had revealed, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. In their revealing the secrets. Yeah, both of those are possible. I think passive is probably better. So why do we use this weird thing? Why do we have this treu in there?
I'm not quite sure. I guess isn't that just the way Coptic phrases sentences like this? I mean, it's not typologically odd, so.
No. Is it?
I mean, so Hebrew does pretty much the same with infinitives and prepositions.
Yeah, a lot of language. I think even English does this, not as frequently, but it still can. Especially in, you see it most in English when it's necessary to sort of like disassociate the action from the person. So like in like signs at airports or whatever, they're like, during disembarkation, please remember, or whatever. Like they'll use this kind of like abstracted language so that they're not issuing any direct commands to their customers. Although of course they are, because they have the legal ability to do that, but they don't want to highlight that. So yeah, you'll get these kind of constructions in all sorts of languages. It's not really necessarily weird. I don't know if I think it's weird. I think it's more like, I think you could ask why are things this way about anything, and it's often a useful question to understand things. And in this case, the answer that I always go to is, like, how else would it be? How else would you do this in Coptic? How else would you say, someone's doing something? Like, how else could you have a subject and a verb and then nominalize that entire phrase so that you can kind of like package it up and move it around and put it as the object of a preposition or whatever it is you want to do with it? How else could you do that with Coptic? And off the top of my head, I can't really think of another way. And that's kind of the thing I want to say about this is this, although it is the causative infinitive and it is literally like if we wanted to write the Egyptian here, it's this really strange thing. It is, obviously pa, and then deets, iru, I suppose. So we'll just have to use this u, and then cholap, whatever that is historically. It's this really strange combination of things that historically would never have been put together in this way, but they, over time, this way developed of really having a subject and a verb and an entire predicate, and being able to just wrap all of that up and put an article on it and treat the whole thing as though it were one noun. And as far as I can think right now, this is really the only way of doing that. But it's nothing like the actual phrase if you like dig down and look at what it is, like historically. So this is giving or causing that they do X. So in the they're causing that, in the causing that they do reveal these secrets or these mysteries. Once you break it all apart that way, it kind of stops making sense. But it is really the only way of constructing this phrase where you take a verb that has a subject and a predicate and then just package it all up into a noun. And the really important thing to notice here is that this construction that we just learned about in Lambden, although it is like the causative infinitive, the causative part is what's really been left behind, and the infinitive part is what we've retained from that. So in order to have a way to put a subject with a verb and then treat that whole thing as a noun, we have just kind of stolen this causative construction and just started using it everywhere, using it as objects of prepositions and putting an article in front of it and all those things, which really has nothing to do with its historical meaning, but it's just because it was the thing that was there that had a subject and predicate packaged together. It was the thing that was available. So you, instead of like creating a new construction in the course of speaking to someone, what you're much more likely to do, human beings in general, what they're much more likely to do is just grab a construction that they already have and not worry about the fact that it doesn't mean exactly what they want it to mean. And that's how these kind of things develop. I think this is probably the clearest case of that in Coptic. And it's also the one that is the least complete. So there are plenty of cases where this truly does mean cause that they reveal. And I think we'll see one in these exercises actually, where it's like etref or something. And it is in order to cause that they reveal. But then doesn't have to have that meaning. So yeah, that's a lot about that. But we'll see so many examples of it that when we see an example, in a later lesson or in a reading activity or something, I'll remind you of this and say like, see, here's a case where it really is causative. And then, 5 minutes later, it'll be like, see, here's a case where it has utterly no causative meaning left at all. And in fact, if you put that in there, it totally breaks the sentence. So you have to get rid of it. And it is both at the same time because language is a very improvisational sort of thing. Anyway, okay, so that was a lot about that, but we can go back to our exercises. Rasmus, what do you think about number 3?
Yes, so that's hem petrepueb aheratef hirem perpe. As the priest stood in the door of the temple. Yeah.
Do you want to try to make it like more literal, more kind of like word by word?
In that the priest stood his feet at the door of the temple.
Yeah, interestingly,
at the mouth of the temple.
I didn't notice this before, but this is actually her ro en. This preposition hirem is upon the mouth of, And then perepe is, you know, pa, obviously. And then the word for temple is actually erper. So I think it's entrance of house. The entrance of the house, I think, is the etymology of that. So it's at the entrance of the house, where none of those words entrance retain their meaning in the Coptic sentence.
So the word, the Coptic word for temple is etymologically just entrance of house?
I think so, yeah. That's definitely what it's made of. And this is how it's often written in hieroglyphs, with the two strokes that mark these as individual words. So I think it is a compound word. And then the house, of course, is like the god's house.
Weird.
But that becomes the word for temple by late Egyptian. I think actually in the Pianki stela, it's used for the temple that he visits at Memphis, where he is definitely, like, he has conquered Egypt by force, and he's going to like honor the gods. And so he must be entering like the innermost sanctum of the temple, but he uses the word erpe. So, you know, it's kind of taken on this meaning of like the inside of the temple, but it probably originally referred to the forecourt where ordinary citizens could go and honor the gods. So it drifted inward over time, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, okay, so that's a lot about that. Mustafa, do you want to do 3 of these?
Oh, of course. Menensa teres hai so hijim pijuma. After that, you write to them.
Just them.
Write to them on the book.
Good. Yeah. What is this thing? Can you break that apart?
Yeah, of course. Tre, actually causative.
Yep. Which form?
Sakai is actually is presuffixal.
Yep.
I don't know which form it is.
No, I mean, which form of the causative is this?
Second,
Good.
masculine.
Yeah, that's right. Where are my causatives here? Okay, yeah, it's this one. Oh, I already have it highlighted from the previous class. That's nice. It's not masculine, it's second person feminine.
Yeah. I confused.
That's okay. Yeah, so it's the second person feminine. And then what is Sue?
To them. Actually, in
Just
Lambden
them.
it said, yeah, them. Yeah, it's them.
So it's a direct object suffix.
Yeah.
And it's the third person plural.
Yeah.
I'm pointing it out because I think this is the first time we've seen it in this class, which is a little strange because it's not that rare a form, but I just don't think we've talked about it before. So this is the direct object suffix, the third person plural. It is actually one of the few descendants of the older Egyptian sen, the third person plural sen. And then so there are really 2 forms. There's se and sen. They both mean the same thing. I'm sorry, se and su. Both mean the same thing. And I believe that they come from sen. So this suffix pronoun. And then su is interesting because it kind of seems to come from both, right? It kind of seems to come from the older sen form and the newer u form kind of merged into one. Although it's possible that the vocalization of the vowel here was an A, which would become, it would be something like san, and then if it were ever stressed, which it wasn't, but for whatever reason, it becomes something like son, and then the presence of the final nasal makes it su, soon, or su. However that came about, I actually don't know the exact history, but something like that happened. And I think we might be seeing it for the first time in an exercise here. So after you wrote them upon the book, right?
Yeah.
So sorry, can I just ask another question about Sue?
Of course.
I mean, that makes perfect sense, but I was surprised to see in the in Lambden's glossary, he actually gives sahais and sahait as pre-suffixal forms of the verb.
Oh my
So
gosh.
is he analyzing them differently, or is this just a help to students who don't know Middle Egyptian? Because he doesn't want to explain the Sue thing.
I don't know. I don't know, Ralph. That's a great question.
Okay. Because I didn't see anything in the text where we would understand how to read that before we saw it in the exercise, but
yeah, and so it's not just me who's thinking that we haven't seen Sue before. We haven't. Although it is definitely a thing that exists in Coptic. There's definitely a Sue direct object pronoun that shows up in other cases, not just after Ashai. But if Ashai can have, how would Ashai have an S on the root? I think it's just a lack of imagination on my part, but I cannot think of any way for that S to get onto the verb root, because it just does not have an S at the end of it. It just doesn't. Like what it's this word that's often transcribed sesh or whatever. Wow, that is an ugly rectangle. It's this word. Sesh.
Elon mostly said this Sahar. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is probably Zecha or whatever, Zecha with a fourth H, although it is very often transcribed as Zesh by Egyptologists, mainly because it's just a logogram, so it doesn't reveal much about its phonetic quality, but I don't think there's any argument for there being an S anywhere, or any way to come up with that. So maybe Lambden is making it a little easier. He wants to use this sentence with an U. But,
I mean, is Lambden saying that the base verb has an S in it? Because I didn't read him saying that.
Ralph?
so in the glossary, he gives a variant of the pre-pronominal form with the S or a T before the suffix.
Right.
T makes sense because that's just the infinitival T that
Right.
that does get like thrown onto the ends of verbs that didn't originally have it by this process of generalization.
Could the S be some kind of sibilant harmony thing? Because it starts with sa. I mean, I don't know.
Even more broadly, it could be a sort of lenition. I mean, it's a very common thing for T's to change into S's. Really, cross-linguistically, that is very, very common. I'm thinking primarily of like Latin oblique forms that have a T where the nominative has an S. I'm pretty sure that's the result of lenition. So like a word like fonts, Fuente or font or whatever.
The S in fonts would be the old nominative S that comes after the T and then elides the T.
Oh,
so
okay.
If you go back to Proto-Italic, it would be fonts. That's a process of affiliation of the T after an S, before an S.
I see. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I just assumed that like a root T just kind of changed into an S.
No, the S is the old marker.
Cool. And then I guess with the genitive, when you have the I in there, it like protects the T from being assimilated.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It's the cluster that's simplified.
Bless you.
Thanks.
Okay, so what is this S doing? I now don't know. I thought I knew. But I also did, like, the reason we're talking about it at all is because I thought it was really weird that we suddenly had a case of Sue, because I didn't think that we had talked at all about Sue. And I don't remember where this is in Lambden. It's in some previous chapter where he gives us, well, it's never going to work here. There's some previous chapter where he gives us the direct object pronouns, and I don't remember him giving us Sue, although that is correct. There is a Sue.
He does mention the S in this chapter on page 84. And the way I read it is that he says that, oh, you remember that oo of the third person plural? If the verb ends in a diphthong, then sometimes has an S in front of it. So he gives it almost as if it was an alternate version of the traditional oo pronoun. So I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that it hails from an older Egyptian word that's different.
Yeah,
good point.
I'm pretty sure it does, especially because it has the variant se, which he doesn't mention here. But Sue can be written se, and it's the same. So you could say to know se, to send them. And that there's really no good way to get se from the third person plural oo. You really have to bring in sen for that to make sense. Oh, it sometimes appears before other suffixes. Now, why is that? I don't know. I don't know. And that's like, I think that's a good thing. Like whenever, I always feel really excited when I encounter something like this, where it's like, I have a bunch of parts of it. Like I kind of have like the area around this phenomenon sketched out really well, but specifically, why is this the way that it is? I just don't know. I think there's also this really fun thing in looking at languages historically, where it's very common in like classics and all of its adjacent or derivative fields, like Egyptology obviously is one. There's kind of this very traditional like philological method where Cicero's Latin is so precise and reliable that you can like you can design a finite state automaton that like produces grammatical Latin based on Ciceronian rules. And so from that, there's this long tradition of like every single thing should have a robust history and set of causes that lead to the thing that we see. And anyone who looks for any amount of time at their own native language will see that that is definitely not the case. That is not how languages work. For example, my father, who is from Oklahoma, for whatever reason, he says past, like all of us do, but he also says across with a T on the end of it. By analogy with other words like past, or because there are words like often or whatever in English that have a written T that's only pronounced as a sort of hypercorrection when you're trying to speak politely. I have no idea, probably all of the above, right? Like it's just messy. He just puts a T on the end of that word. And no matter how many times I make fun of him for it, he's gonna go right on doing it. Even though there's no historical basis for that at all. And lots of people where I'm from do. They say across with a T. Why? I have no idea. A lot of people where I'm from say boughten as the past participle of the word buy. Where'd they come up with that? I don't know. They're just winging it, right? And I think the Sioux is very probably one of those kind of things. It's like, it kind of sounds like the oo, and a lot of verbs end in a T, which, especially to non-literate people is quite similar phonetically to an S. I noticed when I was teaching as a volunteer at a literacy program that the difference between T and S was one of the hardest ones for non-literate people to identify, because those sounds are almost identical to people who don't know how to read and write, because they don't have the letters kind of forcing them apart in their minds. So yeah, it's probably all of those things working together to produce this kind of form where I think it's a good idea as an exercise to try to explain it, and I think we should. I think that would be a great paper about Coptic language. But at the same time, I don't think we can assume that it really does have a precise explanation. I think language is just kind of flexible like that. And this is a good reminder of that, lest we get kind of too rigid in our thinking about how everything should have a very, concrete explanation. And we miss out on all kinds of cool, fun stuff like this as a result. Yeah, great question, Ralph. I mean, I talked at length about that. So I'm gonna go. Let's just do number 5. Does anyone have any questions about this before we move on?
No.
No. Okay. Wise choice. Number 5, Mustafa.
Yeah. Hem Petreu noche pef soma agem pekocht while they throwing his body onto the fire.
Yes. And we will all assume, for the sake of our sanity, that this is the body of a person who has died before these events. I don't know why he puts these like heinously violent sentences in here. I really wish they weren't. And I'm not even squeamish. I
think
it just makes
it's
me
from
uncomfortable.
maybe from something like a story of, I don't know. There is a couple of stories I know in
Like Dido.
Bible.
Oh yeah, people get burned alive in the Bible quite a lot. I'm going to move on. Actually, let's do number 6.
Mensa tren sol sel sol low. After that, we console them or we comfort them. I don't know which one it is.
Both. I mean, the Coptic doesn't really distinguish, and even in English, the difference between comfort and console, it's very small. I mean, if anything, console is just a bit more kind of higher register. People don't really use that in everyday speech as often as comfort. But whatever, yeah. After we comforted them. Good. Okay, Ralph, do you want to do 3 of these?
Sure. Him petrade diabolos piradzeemov, henunoke imperadsmos.
Good.
So, as the devil tempted him with a great temptation, or tested him with a great temptation.
Yes. And I'll just point out really quickly the thing that a student in the other class mentioned. This construction where you have like a noun and then, a verb and then a verbal noun that are from the same root. It shows up a lot in Coptic. It actually does show up in Middle Egyptian, but it's more frequent in Biblical Hebrew. So you often have this construction of like, so-and-so saw a vision or whatever, where the verb and then the direct object noun is identical to the verb. It's just like the nominal form of the verb. And that's just like a rhetorical strategy that Coptic inherits both from its own earlier Egyptian history and from the religious tradition that comes from
maybe it is kind of a Beiti Beitak situation. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that situation. There's really 2 forces. There is the dissimilation force, where you kind of avoid using the same word in 2 adjacent sentences because it doesn't sound good to be repeating the same word over and over. And then there's the kind of going beyond that. If you purposely, purposely like go against that rhetorical strategy, you will highlight that specific phrase because you're specifically not doing the thing that people normally do in rhetoric, which is to avoid using the same word twice. You're just flaunting that convention on purpose, and it has the effect of like highlighting the phrase. And I think that's what's happening here. So in the devil's tempting him with a great temptation. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice language. Anyway, okay.
Merensa treftenau impeshere merit Sharon. So after he sent his beloved son to us.
Yes. Why Sharon and not a different preposition?
Last week you said Sharo was more formal.
Yeah, I said more than that, I hope.
Probably.
But
That's all
yeah,
I remember.
Yeah, probably.
More for
I love you too, Ralph. You're so sweet. It's kind of like, it's like a preposition that means like up to, but not actually touching. So it can be used in when you want to be sort of polite and like respect the recipient's personal space, or just kind of like show respect by not implying that whatever you're sending them necessarily has to be taken up by them, right? You're just
I
like
see.
leaving kind of that polite gap.
Up to them, but not at them, sort of.
Yeah.
That's sort of the idea.
Yeah, it's like the difference between talking to someone and talking at someone.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. You want to do number 9 too?
Merensa tref wonehef ebol in nefmetetes. Oh, right. This is one of the revealed words.
Yeah.
So after he revealed it or himself to his students.
Yes, and good call on the it or himself. It's not really clear. It's another one of these, like, it could be reflexive because the verb can be reflexive, but also if there is some kind of antecedent in the previous sentence, it would probably be it. Just depends on the context. Yeah, good translation. After his revealing it to his students. Okay. And then Rasmus, would you like to take 3 more?
Sure. So number 10 is Menensa trapahet pefmtoebol. After I bowed before him or in his presence.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you about this.
Yeah. So the verb is, I think it's just pach, and then the t is the suffix.
Nope.
So isn't it?
Nope, it isn't.
Okay. So the verb is pacht, and then the first person suffix is implicit.
Yeah, you're on the right track. So the verb is pohet. The absolute form of the verb is pohet. So the fact that we have pahet tells us that we must have the pre-pronominal,
Yeah,
aka presuffixal form of the verb.
And then there's this rule that the suffix pronoun of the first person singular appears as a 0 morpheme after a t.
Yes, why?
Oh, why? Some historical reason that I don't remember. I'm not sure.
You're not, yeah, technically correct. It is, so the verb is pohet, and then the first person suffix pronoun historically is e. It's a vowel. So it protects the final t from being lost. So word final t's are lost in pronunciation in Egyptian, but the presence of that vowel protects the t. And then in many cases, by protecting the t, it is the only case where a t appears, right? Because the t is actually part of the infinitive form, and then as a inflectional morpheme, it is lost word finally. So only verbs with a first person singular suffix actually end up having a t on them. In this case, the verb's root has a t on it, so that t is always there. But because we have the alpha vowel, which tells us that this is the pre-pronominal, but then all we have is a t, that means that the only possible option is that there was a final vowel that has been lost. And that can only be the first person singular. Because the second person feminine would have an epsilon, usually. There really are 2 options, but with the second person feminine, there was a final T-like consonant, which was then lost, which protected the vowel. So yeah, it's a whole thing. There's a whole thing going on there.
Yeah.
I think it's fun.
So the 11 is hem petrefsoebol hem papod enas, which is as or while he drank out of the old cup.
Yes. Yeah, good. As he drank out of the old cup.
And 12 is menensa trematoi rekhnenei. After, and this is particularly gruesome, after the soldiers burned our houses or even families.
It's yeah, I don't know
the
why.
entire household.
Are we just like less comfortable? No, we're not, because like before this class, while eating lunch, we were watching The Last Kingdom, and it's just filled with death and murder. You don't usually see them in language study. I guess if you study Latin, you see them all the time. There's like 300 Latin verbs that mean to murder someone. So yeah, that's what it is. After the soldiers burned our houses or our families. You know, take your pick. Mustafa, you want to do 3?
Yeah. Hapes pe eron et renner pete eshe en ovishnem. It is necessary that to us etren actually etren while no, actually it's relative. That
nope, not relative. It's a preposition, and then this is like a nominal construction.
Causative then.
Yep.
Causative then.
And then
etren make that işte means something desire.
No, it's like that which is proper.
Yeah, okay.
Eshe means like to be right or to be proper or to be the way things ought to be.
Then it is necessary that to us to make
or do
make proper.
And then in Woishnim?
At the time, something like.
At what time? At Neem time?
At every time.
Yep, all the time. Okay, now put it all together.
Yeah. It is necessary that to us, make proper every time.
All the time.
All the time, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's necessary for us to do that which is proper all the time. Yeah. Yeah, let's just leave that. That's a weird sentence. I don't love that sentence, but you got it right.
Nine and charge etek nas high so enough. Let me check. Nai actually demonstrative. This.
Yep.
These words, which you.
Nine net in Shaje. Nine net in Shaje. So these are the words.
Yeah. Yep. These are the words that you write them on it.
For him. Or to him.
Yeah, for him. Just try something. Maybe it's reference to something like writing material. I don't know.
I think this nof is like write to, like write a
Yeah.
letter to someone. Or it could be
Yeah.
for him, like on his behalf. It can't really be on it. That would be like,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be this na preposition.
For much more something like mass. Something like it tree third feminine pronoun instead of f.
No, I think it's really the na that, so there are multiple prepositions that just look like n when they're by themselves or when they're before a noun. But the pre-pronominal forms are actually different. So we have na, and we have emma, and I mean, mainly those two. I think there's another one I'm not thinking of. But like the distinction between these two things is actually quite strong, even though they just show up as like n in some cases and they're indistinguishable. When we have this, we know that it is like to or for someone. It's like a dative, right? It's
Okay.
like, yeah. So you're writing it for him or you're writing it to him, like you're writing a letter to him.
Yeah.
Okay, and this na here, coincidentally also na. You translated
Yeah,
this.
you will write.
Good.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Okay. And number 3.
Pece pıhırlo je onoç tek pistis paşere. The old man said, it's a great belief, my son.
Tek pistis.
Your belief.
Yeah.
Your belief is great, my son.
Yes, exactly. Your belief. Probably we would say faith, but belief is also correct. So your faith is great, or your belief is great. It's fine. Your pistis is great. Yeah, the Greek word.
Pistis.
Okay. Pistis. And Ralph, we have 2 more. You can have both.
Right. Eshe etrin shemshetef innovatiinem. It's proper that we serve him always.
Yeah.
At all times.
How would you say this in more like casual English? I mean, I don't know, like I don't see you all the time, Ralph. Do you go about like, it is proper that we purchase milk at this grocer's establishment? Or do you say something?
I would just say like, yeah, we gotta.
Yeah, exactly.
We gotta serve him all the time.
Yes, yeah. Perfect. And that, like, what I really want to say here is that, like, okay, this construction in Coptic is totally different, but like on an everyday human level, what it's actually doing is identical to we gotta. Right? It's just expressing like there is some sort of reason that we should do this thing. It's not really saying it is proper that we do X. Sometimes it means that, but sometimes it just means kind of like we might oughta serve him all the time. Yeah, we should.
Well, that kind of erases the difference between Eshe and Hapes.
Hapes is a little stronger. So hop is it means norm or
proper,
law.
But it's necessary.
Yeah. It's a stronger sense of obligation with Hapes than with Eshe.
So Hapes etrenkyo impema en trompe. So it is necessary that we stay here for a year.
Yeah. And yeah, this would actually be more like we gotta, although, you know, in colloquial speech, we use we
I feel like
gotta for
colloquially
like a
gotta
should.
covers both of them. It's the
Yeah,
same
it does.
idea, but it's like we must or we should.
Yeah. Yeah. And this one is like we must, and the previous one is like we
And
should.
esche is like should.
Yeah. But you can, of course, you know, for the sake of your own studies, you can always translate esche as it is proper if that makes it easier. But I do always want to highlight, you know, what we're getting in Coptic, even in informal Coptic texts, is really it's a living language, and that's one of the things that makes it so interesting. If you're interested in Egyptology, is like this and the tomb robbery papyri are really the rare cases where we get a glimpse of ordinary Egyptian people walking around having conversations like we're out of milk, right? Whereas everything that we get, we got to go to the store, we're out of milk. Most of the stuff that we get in hieroglyphic texts is really very polished language. And the example that I always use to argue this, I actually use this example to argue a lot of things, but we know the Coptic word for fart. We do not know the ancient Egyptian word for fart. And
nobody put that on their tomb wall. I am one
nobody
who
ever
farted
carved it in
times.
stone. Nobody ever carved that into stone. And I think, as silly an example as that is, like, you cannot really claim to know a language if you don't know that word, because every 3-year-old knows that word, right? You know, that's just a component of real humanity and, you know, everyday existence that does not get carved on temples, but it definitely gets said. And that's kind of one of the things we're getting with Coptic. One of the reasons that people like me who study Egyptian language love this language so much is that you do get those things. You know, you get the like everyday, mundane, like human existence kind of things. And I think that's delightful.
Maybe we can create as a fancy something like in Middle Egyptian ergo. Maybe
yeah,
we
it'd
can
probably be something like
reconstruct
guess. If I were to try to reconstruct it, you know, just for the curious out there, I would guess that it would be the word guess, because the Coptic word is chos. So etymologically, it's probably this. I don't know what would the determinative or classifier be for this.
Something like I think man.
Sorry, it was just funny.
Jim Allen always jokes that it's probably one of the like 100 words that Egyptologists translate as like to be content or something, because we have all these words that we don't actually know what they mean, and we just translate them in this like very banal way of like to be pleased with oneself or whatever. But yeah, this is probably, that might even be right, Ralph. Like, although we are joking, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if that was actually the real, like, if someone had ever written it, that's probably what they would have written.
guess.
Anyway, okay, so enough about farts and sunshine. That's all we're gonna do today, and I hope you all have a great week, and I will see you all next Saturday or sooner.
Great.
Yeah,
thanks everyone.
See you.
Okay, you too.
See you
Thanks.
next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.